So, hello Daisy, hello Bruno. My name is Dylan. I've met Daisy before. I haven't met you, Bruno, though. I am the technical design professor at IGA, which means I get to teach a bunch of Unity stuff. I get to teach a bunch of programming stuff, and if I'm lucky, I get to teach a bunch of game design stuff as well, uh, for the design part of that title. And I've been making games for a few years. One of my favorite parts about games are game jams. I mentioned uh, we're doing one in a day, but I've been doing them since pretty much, yeah, for a while. Is it 2020, 2019? I did my first game jam, something like that. Really fun, and I've had a lot of success there. Um, I just made the last game jam I made was a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago. I don't know, time flies. I made a fun little spaceship game for Ludum Dare, where you go around these asteroids mining crystals, upgrading your spaceship. It was the first time I did it in 48 hours, and it turned out great. And so, what I'm going to be doing is showing you how to create your own game in Unity so that you can continue practicing by yourself, so that you can keep on doing game jams or just tutorials, literally anything you can do just to increase your experience. As a small icebreaker, oh, we have someone
Oh,
coming in.
he's
Hello.
hello.
As a small icebreaker, sorry, I was got started just a minute before you came in. I'm so sorry. I'd love to get to know all of you and know how much experience you have with Unity. Like I said, I have a few years, but I'm sure some of you might have a little bit less than that. So I'd love to go around with all of you and just tell me your name, what your experience is with Unity, and what your favorite game is. And I'd love to start with Daisy since you're on the very far left. I think Daisy is unable to talk, so I'm gonna switch over to Bruno. Do you want to go?
For sure, yeah. So I'm Bruno. I
Oh, I'm
have
hearing a lot of background noise from Unitalia, by the way.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I forget all the time.
Hey guys. I'm Bruno. I'm a developer. Not a unit developer though. I
Oh,
have very little experience with Unity, but I have some experience with C Sharp and JavaScript. So I think I won't be super far from my silo here. And favorite game is tough, right?
yeah. That's why I saved that last question for last.
Mm, I will say I'm gonna choose one very old one. Alex Kidd from Master System. Very old and classic. Do you guys know that?
I don't remember that at all.
Yeah, so you beat your enemies playing rock, paper, and Caesar. It's a very old game and a very beautiful design. So I would try to drop the like a YouTube link or whatever for
Yeah,
you
if you
guys.
could drop something in chat, I'll check that out after class. That sounds fun.
Awesome.
Daisy says that her experience with Unity is very limited. Her name is Daisy, and she started about 6 months ago using it, and she knows almost nothing about coding. So, uh, pretty much polar opposites there. Daisy has experience with Unity, Bruno doesn't, and it's flip flopped on the coding part as well. What about you, Natalia? And Daisy, put in your favorite game. Can't escape that one. Oh, if you're talking, I can't hear you right now. Ooh. Yeah, now you're muted. It might be picking up the wrong default microphone. I noticed that um, Gather tends to select the wrong default microphone. So if you click on the microphone symbol, the little down arrow right next to the mute button, you'll be able to select the right one. That might be the issue.
Can you hear me
Oh,
now?
there we go. Perfect.
Hooray! Sorry, I actually just switched from my headset to. Anyway,
Okay.
I apologize.
Okay.
My experience with Unity is pretty non-existent. I did like one super brief workshop before, so I'm like mildly familiar with the layout of the sort of main screen, but yeah,
Okay.
not very much at all. And favorite game right now is Vampire Survivors. So that is it.
I I'm a fan of Vampire Survivors as well. I won't say that I'm a big fan. I played like the first time I played was last February or something. Um, and it really opened up my eyes to game design and just um, how people are. Oh, I'm missing the words. Um, just how people work when it comes to being. All the words just left my brain. Um, Enthusiasm towards games and what makes you keep on playing. And it inspired me so much that I actually created my own version of it called Quest, which was a 2D platformer where you go and you collect all these wisps and you have to complete these quests. There's no combat in it, but the more quests you complete, the more superpowers you get. And so at the start of the game, you're just walking around like a regular 2D platformer, but by the end of it, you're flying around and it's crazy. The very inspiring game in game design terms.
Yeah, I mean, I admittedly only played it on mobile, and
Mm,
but I totally hear what you're saying. Just about like I'm like, what is making this so addictive?
yeah,
Like that was something that was interesting to me.
it's kind of like Cookie Clicker. I have a feeling it might spawn a new genre. Yeah. I see Bruno said Alex Kidd. Okay. I thought you said something else. I think I have played a little bit of Alex Kidd. Oops.
Yeah, that's an old game, but
Long
I
time
really
ago.
like the game design and the simplicity of it. So it's pretty cool.
I'll have to watch this video later. Okay. And then Daisy also says that their favorite game in the entire world is Animal Crossing Wildbird. And Animal Crossing is a good game. Nothing to say there. It's just a really solid game. Okay. So before we get started, I want to make sure that everyone has Unity Hub downloaded. Does everyone have that downloaded and installed a version of Unity and opened up at least one project?
I
Everyone?
have downloaded. I didn't start a new project because I didn't know what kind of new project to start.
Okay.
I just,
Um, but you came up to the screen where it had a bunch of templates for you?
exactly, yes.
Okay, that should be good. So I am going to start sharing my own screen. Is a car passing by outside? Okay. Screen two, sure. Come on, gather, dock, second monitor, go. Please, please gather. Please work with me. Okay, fine. It's not working with me at all. Cruel. Okay, that'll have to do. So I'm going to open up Unity Hub real quick. And so if you open up Unity Hub, this is the very first thing you do whenever you start a Unity project, or even whenever you want to open up a Unity project. Uh, so essentially, what Unity Hub is a collection of two things. It's both your projects, but also your Unity installs. So in the old days from before Unity Hub, what we had to do was frankly very silly. We had to have each version of Unity installed separately somewhere on our hard drive, and we would have to open it up and open up each project from there, and we would just have to mentally keep track of which projects were opened up with which version. It was very difficult. So they made Unity Hub, and now it works awesome. So we can actually see our installs by clicking on this installs button. And Natalia, do you have a install of Unity?
I do,
Okay,
yes.
sweet. Yeah, easy peasy then. So you can have a bunch of installs here. In my case, I only have 3. I haven't updated it in a while. Um, you can add versions very easily. It doesn't really matter what version you're using, so long as you have anything that's came out in the last 3 years or so, you should be fine. And in the projects tab, you'll also see all of your projects, and it will also show you which version of Unity it has. And there's also this magnificent blue button in the top right. It says new project. Click on that. I'm going to create a new project. I'm going to name it Flappy Bird. I'm just going to call it Flappy Bird. You can choose its location. And for the template, we want to select 2D specifically. We don't want to select 3D because Flappy Bird is a 2D game. And it'll also change a bunch of defaults. You can change it back to 2D after you create the project, but keep with 2D. I'm going to hit create project. This can take a few minutes, uh, especially on slower machines. It can take a while, as a fair warning. One of the great things about Unity is that, well, actually, I think it's time for trivia. So, Unity is the biggest game engine. It's why we teach Unity. It's because a lot of people they break into the game industry with Unity. It disappeared. And it's just so popular. Does anyone know what the percentage is of games made by Unity in the last year or so? Like, what percentage of games were made with Unity engine in the last year? Anyone know that? It
Hmm.
used to be as high as 60. It's gone down a good bit. Yeah, Daisy says 40. It's a little bit higher than that.
I would say 50, 55.
A little bit lower than that.
45?
I think it's right around 45. Last I checked, it was 46%. But yeah,
So what
Unity.
has I have a question. What has taken over since Unity? Is it like Unreal or something else or
It's a great question. So it goes back to like Unity was the first game engine. Before Unity, we had to pretty much build our levels in code. And then when Unity came out, we could finally actually see we could build our levels and we could put in textures and all this thing, and we could do all of this in one program. It was mind blowing, and we can compile the game right there. It was really, really great. And so it was the first. And then other programs started to come out, things like Unreal, things like Godot more recently, not Godot, GDevelop. All of these game engines are slowly coming out, and frankly, Unity is used for a lot more things than just game dev nowadays. Like, it's used for movies, it's used for building cars in real life. So the program is a little bit bloated, and that's kind of the reason why it's taking so long to create a new project for me right now. Um, it can be a little bit slow and bulky, and so that's why people are experimenting with other engines. People are creating their new engines all the time. If you look on game jams, you'll see people posting like, "Hey, I'm using my custom physics engine for this and whatnot," and it's like, come on, just use a regular engine. There's so many out there. But yeah, so there's a lot of other engines. Nonetheless, Unity is still a really popular one, and it's frankly really powerful. You could say, I don't want to say this with confidence because I don't want to be called out, but I'd say it's probably the most powerful engine out there right now. And it's definitely the easiest to pick up, learn, and break into the industry with. And so that's why we teach it. The game that we're going to create today is not going to be stellar. It's not going to be like this great MMORPG, but it is going to be a game that you have created, and it's going to be uh, maybe not your first game, depending on who you are, but it is going to get you over that first hump. This is what Unity is. This is what it can do. And by the end of it, you'll be able to create more games in Unity. You'll be able to follow other tutorials or even do stuff on your completely yourself. And that's something I really want to stress. A lot of people ask us all the time, how do I break into the industry? How do I get better at making games? Um, do I buy these books and just read them and crunch them down or something? And what we have come across time and time again, these are not my own words. We have a podcast every Wednesday, and the guests that come in there, that are in the industry, mind you, have told us time and time again the best way to get better at sound design, Unity, programming, art, is just to keep on making games. It sounds a little bit silly, but seriously, practice makes perfect. And so that's what I want to teach you guys today, how to get over that first hump. Whew, I need a drink of water. So when you open up Unity, I should drink my water first. So when you open up Unity, it looks a little bit intimidating. Hierarchy, scene, game, inspector, project, console. There's a bunch of tabs everywhere. But believe me, it is very easy to use once you actually know half the stuff that's going on. And one thing that will also make it easier is actually changing our layout. So you can resize these windows. You can even take these tabs and pop them out. and put them right next to other tabs. And that's actually what we're going to do because it is a little bit confusing how Unity has it by default, in my humble opinion. So what we're going to do is change this layout a little bit. So you'll notice in the very middle, there's this scene tab and there's this game tab. What I want to do is pop out this game tab by holding down left click, dragging it. I want to put it on the right of the scene tab. So just put it right here with the intention that they're side by side. And then make it about even.
To the right.
And then you want to do the same thing with the console and the project. So take this console, drag it out, put it on the right here. And in the console's case, the messages in the console are very long. So you want the console window to be very long, somewhere around there. And then there are also these 3 dots next to all of these windows. You want to click on that for the project window and click 1 column layout. You can do 2 column layout if you want, but I tend to experience that people are more comfortable with the 1 column layout. Really just up to your preference. Once you get more comfortable with Unity as well, you'll probably be doing really crazy layouts. The layouts that I use on my personal projects are super, super crazy. Whew. So does everyone have it so that there are all 6 windows visible on the screen? The layout looks kind of like this, or whatever your preference is. Sweet. Okay, so I'm going to go in clockwise order. I'm going to start with hierarchy, just explaining each of these windows. The very first one is hierarchy, and this is a collection of all of the game objects in our scene. And those 2 words, game object and scene, those are keywords. A scene is, well, can someone tell me what a scene is? Anyone want to take a guess? I know Bruno and Daisy, you don't have a lot of experience. Sorry, Bruno and Natalia, you don't have a lot of experience with Unity, but take a stab at it. What do you think a scene is?
Seeing what you see, where you, I don't know, where the action happens.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's a way to describe it. I'd say that there's probably a few words that you're missing. It is everything that you see. It's a collection of all the game objects. I think what a lot of people compare it to is a level. So if you look at Super Mario Bros. Or something, every level in the game, 1-1, 1-2, 2-1, 2-3, whatever, each of those are different scenes. And it can be a little bit more advanced than that. Like the main menu, for instance, is a scene. You might make the pause menu a scene. Don't do that, though. You might even make the underground level in a particular level its own unique scene. It's really just a collection of objects. Objects might be players, enemies, the level itself, like bricks, and coins, all that kind of stuff. In the case of Flappy Bird, it is a bird and the pipes and maybe the background and music as well. So that's what a scene is. Right now, we have 1 game object in our scene. It's called main camera. If we click on that, you'll notice a bunch of things happen. I'll talk about them in a second. And right now, the scene is called sample scene. We can create a bunch of these and add them to our game, but I'm not going to be doing that today. Next to that is the actual scene view. This is what allows us to manipulate objects. So I could take this camera, for instance, and move it around if I select the move tool. You don't have to, but this is where we're actually going to be putting things down. Then there's the game view, which is the really good thing about Unity. You can create your level, and whenever you click this play button, the game will turn on. It will start playing right there in the inspector or in the editor, and that's what this window is for. It'll show us the player's view of the game. It'll show us the character, and we'll be able to, while we click on this window, we'll be able to press WASD to move around and all that good stuff. The fourth window is the inspector. This is probably the most important one. It's arguable, but you're going to be spending a lot of time in the inspector because it has a lot of things going on in it. So if I were to click on main camera, for instance, you'll notice that this inspector blows up to have a whole bunch of options in it. And what this is showing us is at the very top, it says what we are currently selecting. In this case, we're selecting the main camera. We could rename this if we wanted to. And it shows us some tags, layers that this is on. and it shows us the three components that this camera has. The way scenes work is that they are a collection of game objects, and the way game objects work is that they're a collection of components. So, Bruno, you might be familiar with object-oriented programming, for instance. And the way Unity works is it has a little bit of object-oriented programming that is just one massive player object that has all of the components built into it. But Unity is mostly a component-driven programming system. So instead of, if you're making like a dog, for instance, you could program like this barks and all that stuff. It has fur. But if you want to use a component-driven system, you might have a different component for the bark, you'll have a different component for its diet and its fur. And then if you want to switch that out, if you want to make a cat, instead of programming the whole thing from scratch, instead you take that fur and you take the diet maybe, and then you just program in the meow, and then you have a cat. It's reusable. So what the inspector shows us is that this main camera has a transform component, it has a camera component, and it has an audio listener component. And it has a whole bunch of settings that we can use to change the way this works as well. So I want you to, as an example, just to get a little bit familiar with this, select the main camera, and in this background section, click on that color and a color wheel will appear, and just make it the background whatever color you want. This is a good way to make it so that your game stands out from other people really quickly. And that Game Jam game I just mentioned a bit ago, I had this color as an accent color, so I'm going to keep at that. I apologize if you can hear cars, by the way. This road is really busy randomly. Whew. So, okay, I'm going to move on really quickly, and then I'll open up for questions. Next up is the console tab. This is, while the inspector is the most important, console is, no, I can't even say arguably, console is the scariest. It is going to be telling you exactly what's wrong, and it's going to be flashing red and yellow and all these really scary colors. And it will be panicking, you will be panicking whenever the console appears, but it's actually not that bad. Once you get familiar with the console, it tells you exactly what's going on, and it's not trying to scare you, it's just trying to say, hey, if you change this thing a little bit, I'll be happy. You'll be happy too. We might mess around with the console later, but for now, keep it big and visible. That way, if any errors do appear, you can see them. They'll just be really long red blocks or yellow blocks or white blocks, depending on the kind of message it wants to tell you. Last thing is the project window. And this is the one that you're probably most familiar with, honestly, because it's just basically a file explorer. It is a file explorer, in fact. So if I was to right click on any of these, I'm just going to show this for a demonstration. We can see that this is exactly that. We have a scenes folder, and if I double click on that, we'll have the sample scene that we are currently messing with. And you'll notice that everything, when you actually open it up in the File Explorer, has a double meta file. It's like everything's duplicated. Just ignore that. It's just Unity trying to say, this is the settings I want for this particular thing. You can ignore all of them, though. There's also this packages section that has all of the packages that you currently have installed, and Unity has a bunch installed with a default project, but we're only going to be messing with the assets. I know I went through that a little bit quickly. Does anyone have any questions about these windows or the layout or anything like that? This is secretly my cue to drink water.
All good.
Thank you. Okay. So another thing that I want to show you before we get started, as soon as you change the color on the camera, I just want to point out that there's this little star right here next to sample scene. It's also up here. And what that asterisk means is that you have unsaved changes. What I'm going to do real quick, I always do this too late and then something horrible happens. So I'm going to do that right at the start. Click on File, click Save, please. Another way to do it, hold down Control and click S. Just do that religiously. It'll save your life. Sometimes Unity does crash. Doesn't happen often, but when it does, it always tries to do it at the worst possible moment. So Yeah, just try to defeat the machine early and control save. All right, so we have this beautiful game that has so many colors in it, one color, and what we want to do is make it so that this actually has some behavior in it, some gameplay elements. And what we want to do is make new game objects that have components that tell Unity how the game object works. Right now we have a main camera, but we want to add in a player. And for demonstration purposes, I'm also going to be adding in like a block that the player can stand on. So in order to add in new game objects, I want to hit this plus symbol in the hierarchy, go to 2D object, sprites, and I'm going to put in circle, and that'll be my player. I'm going to rename this to player. I'm just calling it player just because if I was to call it circle or if I was to call it bird, and if I change the theme of the game, it would no longer be recognizable. So it's just safe to call things a little bit, name things a little bit generically. That way we can save ourselves from that kind of trouble in the future. All right, so now we have a player. I also want to, I'm just gonna move this up a little bit. All I have to do to move this is click and drag inside the scene. And I'm gonna move that up. And I wanna add in another object. So I'm clicking that plus button, 2D object, sprites. I'm gonna add in a square. I'll just leave it there. I'm gonna delete this later, so I'm just gonna keep it as square. Actually, I'm gonna keep it, but still. So really quickly, just to go over this, there are different tools that you can use to edit objects in Unity. So by default, it's at the top left of the scene. There's this hand, there's these arrows that, oh, they kind of match up with my cursor really nicely. That's neat. Earlier versions of Unity will have them, I think, up here in the corner. So if you have an older version of Unity, they'll appear there. But the tools themselves are the same. The very first one is the pan tool. You can use that to move around. Second one is the move tool. You can select these axes to move them. You could also select this square in the middle to move them on both axes. There's also a rotate tool. And if you drag this blue line, you can rotate it. It doesn't look like it's rotating because it's a circle, but you'll just have to have faith. And there's also a scale tool, which lets you scale it in different axes as well. There's a tiny little white square where if you hold that down, you can scale it in both. I'm going to Control Z these away. And then there's also the rect tool. This is the one I'm just going to say it now. Just stay in the rect tool. It's just the most intuitive. You can drag things around and you can also use these knobs to scale things. If you have your mouse a little bit outside of the knobs, then you can rotate it. So it's really just an intuitive version of every other tool. And to give you a good example that's not intuitive, that's the last tool, transform. It's everything at once and it's horrifying. Don't use it. So I'm not even going to do anything else with it. So also another thing I just want to point out, you might notice that with the rotate tool, you can rotate it in apparently 3D, even though this is a 2D game. And the reason it seems this way is because, well, you are correct. This is rendering it in 3D. There's this 2D button. Don't click this, I'm just doing it for demonstration. Click on that, it'll show that this is in fact rendering everything in 3D. So that's why it's allowing us to rotate it in 3D as well. Reason it's doing this is because graphic processors are essentially optimized to render things in 3D. They have, it's called vector 3s, it's XYZ position, and they do all of their math with vector 3s. They don't even, for 2D games, they still put in the Z axis. They just set it all to 0 because graphics processors will add in the Z axis anyways. So I'm going to reset this rotation by going into the transform component and clicking 0 there. Ooh. And what I want to do with my fancy little game is make it so that this circle, get this, falls on the square. That's it. But if I click play right now, Unity will start loading, but nothing's going to happen because this is a computer, and one of the really rude things about computers that they like to peeve us with is that they really like to be specific. Bruno knows this as a programmer. If you do one little thing wrong, it is going to uh, completely ignore your wishes. So we have to be very specific with what we want to do. We have to tell it that we want this circle to fall. So in order to do that, we have to add a component that tells Unity to do something. So if we click on the circle, I can either select it in the scene or in the hierarchy. I can click on Add Component at the very bottom of the inspector. And does anyone know the component that I have to add in order to give this thing physics to make it fall?
Yeah, I would guess physics 2D.
Yeah, it's under Physics 2D. There's a lot of them here.
Wow.
Does Natalie have an idea? Natalia, sorry. I don't know why I'm calling you Natalie.
I don't know. I'm looking. Is there like a gravity or something? I don't know.
We do want
Is
it
it
to get
round? Is it-
gravity.
I don't know.
It's okay. Trick question, trick question. It's called a rigid body 2D. So if we just type in this box rigid, we'll notice that two components come up. One of them is just rigid body, and one of them is rigid body 2D. Please ignore the one that does not say 2D. One of the quirks with Unity is that it has both 3D physics and 2D physics, and we only want it to do physics in 2D. We don't want to have 3D physics, and we certainly don't want to have 3D physics and 2D physics at the same time. That would be disastrous. And so what we want to do is select rigid body 2D specifically. Whenever we're messing with physics, adding in a physics component, specifically click the one that says 2D. So now if we add in that component, and I click play, and now it will land on the okay. What happened? This went straight through. What happened?
We need to add collision or something like
Mm-hmm.
that, just to identify collision, right?
Yeah, we need to. So the circle knows that it has physics. The problem is it doesn't know where it's colliding with things. It doesn't know what it's colliding with. It doesn't know if it is able to collide with things. It needs to have a collider. Actually, it does know. It does know that it's not supposed to collide with things. That's why it didn't collide with anything. Jerk. So click on Add Component. I'm still selecting the player. I want to type in Collider. And a bunch of options will appear. Some of them say 2D, some of them don't. Again, click the ones that say 2D, and you can really select anything you'd like, but I'm going to select the circle collider because this is a circle. And now that we have that, I also need to add it to the square. So if I click on the square in the hierarchy or scene, go to Add Component, type in Collider. And this one I'm just going to make a box collider 2D. Bam. And so if we cross our fingers, click play, circle will fall, and bam, home runs, land straight on the square. Does anyone not have a circle landing on a square? I'm going to stress this early. It's okay to be behind. That's the whole reason we're doing this kind of class, this workshop, so that you can interrupt me and ask questions. It's one of the things that YouTube videos don't let you do.
Got it. Got it. Got my
Sweet.
circle sitting on top of my square.
Awesome. Cool. So one thing while we're here, I think I see Bruno is adding in some colliders. While he's doing that, I want to stress that while you are in play mode, if you make any changes, well, one of the cool things that Unity lets you do is that while you're playing the game, you can make changes. So I can select the square and I can actually rotate this. You can get some fun physics going on. But if I stop playing, it will revert back to the changes. It will take away all my changes. And we'll go back to the way it was from before I clicked play. So I just want to clarify, whenever you are playing, don't make any changes. Click the play button so that you can stop playing and then make your changes. There is this pause button, but that is not what you want to do. That only pauses the simulation. It does not stop it, so it will still not save your changes. So click on play every time you want to start making changes and stop the simulation. I even set up my editor to glow yellow just to warn me, hey, you are currently playing, don't do anything. I'd really recommend to look that up later. It's in edit preferences somewhere. You can change your editor color whenever it's playing. Really recommend that. Saved my
Yeah,
life so many times.
that was what's happening with me. I did the changes, and when I
Yeah,
play, it was not working.
there
Yeah.
you go. Perfect example. Also, Control S, save yourself. I don't think I've had a class yet where Unity has crashed on someone. We only have 3 people here, so maybe this time. Okay, so let's see. Now we can actually start to make this look a little bit more like Flappy Bird. And what we can do is change the texture on this player and square to make it look like a bird and pipe, respectively. Maybe even slap a background there. Sound good? Sound good. So I'm actually going to give you this link in chat. This is the downloads to all of the stuff that we'll be using in this project, some sounds, scripts, images. So that's in the room chat and gather. You can find that by clicking the chat button at the bottom right. Should pop up there. And I want you to download all of this. So if you're logged into Google, I believe you just click on the folder name and click download. If you are not logged into Google, I believe there's something that looks like a download button somewhere around here. But the download should be finished up pretty quick, pretty small download. And is anyone on Mac? Do I have any Mac users? Ooh, Daisy is. Okay, well, Daisy has done this before, so that's good. For Windows, if you're on Windows, you just click on the download to make it pop up. And what we want to do is extract this out of the zip folder. For Mac, all you have to do is drag this straight into Unity. But for Windows, we specifically have to extract it first. So if you find that folder, right-click that, and hit Extract All, and it'll come up with this prompt, hit Extract. And a new folder will appear that is extracted, and we can see all of these images, scripts, and sound folder right in there. Now if I bring up Unity and bring up that folder so that I can see both of them at the same time, if I select all of these, I can just drag this straight into the assets folder by dragging it right on top of the word that says assets inside the project window. And then for a little bit, Unity will compile because it's detecting that we have added in images, we've also added in scripts, and so it's just recompiling and making it so that everything works exactly as we intended to. Thank you, Unity.
So I should be able to just highlight it and then drag it. I'm getting the like do not
The don't do
symbol.
that symbol.
Yeah.
It might be that you haven't have you extracted it?
Yeah.
Mm,
Yes.
you
Wait.
might still be in the zip
You know
folder.
what? Yes, you're right. You're right. You're
Okay.
right. That is exactly what is
Whew.
happening right now. Okay.
If you're really having troubles as well, if something weird is going on, you can also right-click on the assets folder, click Show and Explorer, and then double-click on there. This is the same folder, so you can drag stuff in here as well.
Extract.
Okay. Let me know when you're good with that. Giving myself so many cues for water. I'm proud of myself.
Oh yeah.
Ooh.
Cool. It's working.
Awesome. So when you're in Unity, in this project window, you'll have these 4 folders, one for sounds, one for scripts, one for scenes, one for images. And Unity actually lets us preview all of this stuff straight in the editor. So if we click on sounds, it'll play it for us automatically. And if we click on images, we can actually preview it right there. And even for scripts, it'll tell us the contents of the scripts, which I think is pretty cool. And so there's 3 ways to add in the images into our scene. We want to change this player circle into a Flappy Bird. We want to change a square into a pipe, and I want to also put in a background. I'm going to do these things in order. So the first way, not the easiest, but a good way to add in a image to something that already has a bunch of components, instead of just remaking the object, we can just change the sprite by clicking on our player, and there's this sprite parameter inside this sprite renderer component. And we can just drag it from our project window straight onto that circle. Really convenient. It gets really huge, but we'll fix that later. And I want to clarify, do not click on the Flappy Bird and then drag it, because the inspector will change to preview it. That's not what we want. You just want to hold down left click and drag it. Don't click first. Okay. For the square, we want to do something very similar, but a little bit different. Instead of dragging it, there's actually this little circle right next to the section where it says square. If we click on that, it'll show us all of the images that Unity has available to us. For some reason, they have added so many images to it, Unity, and for some reason, they let us select any of these images. There's a lot in here. I seriously don't know why they did this. This is kind of silly. But you can search for them, luckily, by typing in the name of the image. So I'm just going to type in pipe and double click on that. Bam. Seriously, there were like owl versions of Bill Gates, or Steve Jobs rather. I don't know what Unity is doing. I have no idea. So that's the second way to add in a image. And for some reason, the pipe is a little bit more the size we want. Last way is the easiest way. We can literally just drag this from the project window into either the hierarchy, and it will create an object for us, or we can drag it straight into the scene to position it exactly where we want. Perfect. So if we do that, though, we'll notice something weird happens. If we put in this background, this might look different on your end. In fact, I expect it to look different. We have 3 sprites that are on exactly the same flat Z plane. So if I switch over to 3D view, for instance, you don't have to do this, I'm just demonstrating. You'll notice that these images are very, very flat. Like, you could cut someone with that. And Unity is, you might have heard the term Z fighting before, and that's exactly what's going on. These 3 images are fighting for the same Z position. They're fighting to determine who's going to be on top, really brutally, in fact. And we can fix this. If we click on our sunny background, in our transform component, we can directly edit these values. And the Z position, I'm going to set this to any positive number. That pushes this background away from the camera. So if I was going to into 3D view just to demonstrate, if I click on this camera, this is the orthographic view that it can see. And you'll notice that the background is now pushed a little bit further back, so the other 2 sprites are on top. I would recommend you do this even if it seems like the sprites are in the correct order that you want. And I'm telling you to do this out of experience. I mentioned I did my first game jam in 2019. I made Pellet's Bottomless Backpack. Seriously, like a great game. It got really high rankings out of nowhere. There was took place on this dinner table, and there was one moment in the game where the waiter gives you a plate of chicken nuggets, because that's what the player asked for. And some people reported a bug where he just gave you a plate. There was nothing on it. And that's because when I was making this game in the editor, there were chicken nuggets there. There was ketchup there and everything. But when they played it, it was gone. It was still there. It was just behind the plate. So I really recommend you set up your layers ahead of time. There's a cool feature called sorting layers as well that I would use if this was an actual project. It could be some homework for you if you want to look into those. They're pretty easy to use and they're simple enough. So now that we have this sunny background, player, and square, is anyone having trouble setting these up? I'm gonna set this back to 2D view. We all see all these images?
Yep.
Sweet. So now I'm just going to resize these a little bit. We can do this very easily with our rect tool. If we hold down shift while Flappy Bird is selected, and we hold down on these blue circle things, we can drag that down and make Flappy Bird a bit smaller. Make him however big you want, however small you want. About that, I'll make him a little bit bigger. And then for this pipe as well, I'm not going to hold down shift. I just want to make this longer. It'll work for my purposes. And if I click play, we'll actually notice something kind of silly happen. Pow. So the issue is that we scaled the entire game object instead of just the image. And what caused what caused this weird interaction between Flappy Bird and the pipe is that Flappy Bird's collider and the pipe's collider also got scaled down whenever we changed the size of it. So if we click on Flappy Bird and zoom in, you can actually see that there's a green circle, that's its collider, and it is far smaller than its body. And same thing with the pipe, we see this green outline. It might be hard to see on stream, I'm not even sure if it's showing up, but it is very, very hard to see, and because it's so green, and it is smaller than the pipe. So we stop hitting play. We can fix this by, probably the easiest way to fix this is to select the player and find this circle collider 2D. We can just reset the properties on this by clicking the three dots right here and just click reset. Then Unity will automatically calculate how big it wants the collider to be. Nice and easy. And it doesn't quite match up. Looks like it's doing a really lousy way of making this circle collider appear. So we can manually edit this. Whenever we have a game object selected that has a component that is a collider, there's actually this extra tool that appears, secret tool. It's called the Edit Bounding Volume tool. And if we click on that, we'll notice that there's, really hard to see against this background, but there are tiny little squares at the top, bottom, left, and right of the circle, and we can just drag those to make this collider however big we want. I'm gonna make it about there. That seems good. Perfect. You just make that however much you want. You can also mess around with other colliders. Personally, I think that maybe Flappy Bird is more of a capsule shape, so maybe that would be better. And then we want to do the same thing for the pipe. Select the pipe, and in the box collider 2D, three dots. Click on those three dots, click reset, bam. We don't need to edit that anymore. The Unity got it right. So now if we click on play, Flappy Bird goes down, lands on pipe. Exactly how we want it to. Game developers. So now that we have Flappy Bird and pipes, that is very close to the Flappy Bird video game, but it's still got some missing components to it. Most notably, if I move this pipe over to the side, and if I click play, there's no way for me to jump. What's up, Bruno?
Hey Dylan, can you just do the resize thing? I was just like
yeah.
playing around with it. I just missed that. Sorry.
Yeah. So you're asking me like how to?
Yeah, just to as you did with the pipes, just to fill all the.
Oh, for the pipe specifically?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you can select it, and you can either directly edit the Y scale inside the transform component by dragging the
Oh
Y,
no, just
or
the collider. Sorry.
oh, the collider. Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. So you just click on the three dots
Oh,
right
okay.
next to the collider and click reset. Yeah.
Got it. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, Unity does all the good work for you. It tries to wrap the box around the size of the image. It doesn't necessarily wrap it around the visible image, just the size of the image. So if the image is 500 pixels by 500 pixels, the collider will be 500 pixels by 500 pixels, regardless of the how much of the image is actually visible.
Cool. Thank you.
So if I was to move this over to the right, this pipe, does anyone else have any questions? No. Cool. Awesome. That means you guys are understanding things. Most excellent. So if I was to click play, there's a bit of a problem here, and it's just that we didn't implement it yet, but there's no way for Flappy Bird to flap. It just goes down forever and ever. We can actually zoom out on the scene and watch him go down super, super fast. Really fast. Gravity is multiplicative after all. Okay. So what we want to do is, there's no component in Unity that says when we click space or we left click or something, or we tap the screen, make this bird flap. There's no component that says that. what we have to do is go into custom scripting and script in our own component for that. This is where Bruno is going to be completely confident in his skills, and Natalia and Daisy might be a little bit more timid, but we're not going to be doing anything too crazy. We're going to be doing some scripting though, and it can get a little bit complicated, but I at least like to give you some experience with how to script what these keywords are. That way, whenever you encounter a problem in the future, you can Google it with ease and figure out, okay, this is what I need to do to fix this problem, or how to implement this. So in order to create a new script, what we have to do is in this project window, we click on the plus button and a big menu will appear. The second option from the top says C# script. C# is the programming language that we're using. It's the default language in Unity. I think they used to have JavaScript support, but I'm pretty sure they got rid of it. So now there's just C#. And that will allow us to create a new script. And I'm going to call this as an example script hello world. It's important to not include spaces in this. You can call it whatever you want, just as long as it doesn't have any spaces or any other weird characters. I'm going to click enter on that. And if I double click on this, we will see Visual Studio appear. I actually have a bit of a weird scripting setup, so I'm going to go in my preferences and just make sure everything is okay. Oh wow, it's actually set up right. Okay, so if I double click on Hello World now, it will come up with this Visual Studio Code. I have the 2021 version installed, but by default, Unity installs 2019. And just want to note, is anyone having something pop up? It might say like, what tool do you want to use to open up this CS file? Is anyone having that prompt come up? It should install Visual Studio by default, but sometimes something weird happens. Okay, sweet. Red squiggly lines.
Sorry, it opens me, but then it says at the bottom, it says, do you want to install the recommended extensions for C+?
You
Corner? Do I just skip that?
Is C+ or C#?
Sorry, C#.
Okay. Yeah, they created C, and then they created C++, and then their brilliant idea to create the third version of C was to take those two pluses and overlap them to make a hashtag. Really weird. But yeah, you don't need those external things.
Okay.
It might help you. I think you can still do scripting while you're downloading those. You don't need them necessarily, but if I was in your position, I would probably download them.
Okay. I closed it for now. I closed it.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
So one thing that I do want to call out, in my version, I have it so that it shows like Unity script right here, 0 references, Unity message, 0 references. Does anyone not have that? It should say Unity message, and if we hover over start, for instance, it will give us a little tooltip that says start is called just before any of the etc. Does anyone not have this stuff appear?
I don't have that.
What about Natalia or Daisy? I think Daisy figured it out last time.
I do not have it. I have it. It's like telling me that it's in restricted mode.
Restricted mode? Really? Okay, that's new to me. So one of the really nice things about Visual Studio is that it has some integrations with Unity. So whenever you hover over a Unity function, it will tell you this is what it does in Unity. But sometimes it doesn't integrate nicely. What I've noticed is that this might just be on the 2019 version, but if you close out of Visual Studio, just click the X and then open up the Hello World script again, usually that fixes it. If that doesn't fix it, the next thing is to close Unity, open that again, and then open up the script. If that doesn't work, you go into Visual Studio Installer and check to make sure the Unity integration is installed. There's like this really big checklist of things you have to check. If it's not working today, that's okay, but I would recommend that you look up after the class, how do I get this Visual Studio Unity integration going? And if you click on a link, I'm actually just going to Google this here. Unity stack, Unity Visual Studio not integrating. Do something like that. And I'm going to click on this second link that is not from Microsoft. And
Visual Studio is not recognizing Unity.
it's still not working for you. That sucks. Yeah, it's not important. It's nice, but it's not super important. Unity forms broke a while ago. If I click on the first Stack Overflow, then from here I can, there's literally a list right here of 5 different things that you can try. And so that's what I would really recommend. Literally just look up Visual Studio, Unity, integration, not working, and click on the first Stack Overflow link. There's going to be a lot of things for you to try. It could be any number of things. Sometimes it's silly like that.
But
Okay.
we don't need that right away, right? So just do this exercise. Should be fine, right?
Yeah, for today it's fine. I would recommend setting that up for the future, but for today it's fine.
Okay.
Okay. So how am I on time? Kind of good on time. So if you open up Visual Studio, regardless of whether or not the Unity integration is working, you notice a bunch of foreign code that looks really weird. There's squiggly lines, there's different colors of text. It looks really arcane. And I'm here to walk you through it, don't worry. The different things are difficult at first, but the more you code, the more you make games, the more familiar you become with it. As an example, Willem, the founder of IGA, he is in the industry as a game designer, but he originally got in as a programmer, and from his perspective, it took him like 2 years for things to finally click with programming, and he finally figured it out. I'm sure Bruno can probably attest to that as well. But the more you mess around with it, the more familiar it becomes, and eventually you'll be like me and Bruno and Willem and be like, this is my home. Actually, Willem hates coding. I don't know why. But to explain the different parts of the script one piece at a time, at the very top, we have these different blocks that say using and then some combination of words. These are called namespaces, and these are the different libraries of code that this file can access. So there's this using system.collections that lets us use things like arrays, maps, all that kind of weird programming stuff. There's another one, systems collections.generic, which is even more weird. We actually don't need these at all. If you really wanted to, you could even delete these. I'm not going to because they aren't doing any harm, but these ones don't do anything usually. Third one, however, is super important. If you get rid of this, you'll notice that if you have the Unity integration working, it's going to pop up some red squiggly lines and tell you the errors before you even compile the scripts. I'm actually going to do this for demonstration purposes, but if I save this by hitting Control S after deleting that, and I go back over to Unity, it's going to recompile, and that's an example of an error. It's going to say, hey, the type or namespace mono behavior could not be found. So it actually literally says there, are you missing a using directive? So the reason it's giving me that error is because I forgot to include this Unity engine library, because mono behavior is part of that library. And so whenever we get rid of it, we lose out on all of the Unity stuff. Keep that. The fifth line is public class hello world mono behavior. Bit of a mouthful. But essentially, what this is saying is that we are creating something that is public, which means visible to the inspector. And that something is a class, which is a type of object. It's a new type. And it is named hello world. It's the same name as our file. It's important that this word right here is the same name as a file. If you ever rename the file, go back into it and change this to match that name. And hello world inherits all of the behaviors from mono behavior. So essentially what this means is that we're creating a new component. It's called hello world. That's all. You don't have to mess around with anything on this line ever unless you're an advanced user. Just keep it as it is and you'll be good. And then right after that, we have this open open curly brace, and then at the very end of the file, we have this matching close curly brace. There's these dashed lines going straight up and down between them. And what these mean are essentially just anything between these curly braces belong to the thing that was mentioned just before. So for hello world, this is our new component that we made. Everything inside of these belong to hello world. So there are two functions, start and update. These belong to hello world. And same thing with these functions. I'm going to talk about these in a second, but there are curly braces right here. Anything inside of these braces belong to start, anything inside these belong to update, etc. Right after that, we have this function start, and right after that, we have this function update, and we also have this green text. Green text is really cool. It's called comments, and essentially anytime you put a dash dash, a forward slash, it's right next to the shift key on most keyboards, it becomes green, and then anything you write after that is a comment. And this is just human readable text that the computer completely ignores whenever it is compiling the program. So if I was to type in, this is a start stuff, then that tells us that this is just human readable text that we can refer to later. It's really nice whenever we write some code and we want to tell ourselves in the future how it works. There are two functions here, start, update, start, update. You'll see this every time you create a new script. They have the type void, which essentially just means that they do something. They don't add something together. They don't do a math function. It does something. So that might be moving an object around or detecting when you click something. It's not calculating anything, it's doing something. And it is named start, and it has 0 parameters. These parentheses determine the properties that are passed through this function. So if I was to, for example, type in some stuff into these parentheses, it would pass through parameters that we could use in this function later, but we aren't going to be doing anything like that today. And so anything belonging inside of this start curly brace belongs to this. So anytime we want to write some code that happens at the very start of the game, it says right here in this comment, start is called before the first frame update at the start of the game. And for update, update is called once a frame, usually 60 times a second. So if I was to code in some player movement, I would type in some code in update, and if I was just trying to, say, initialize the player health, make it so that it equals 10 or whatever our default health is, I would put that in start. So as a example, if I was to type in some code here, you don't have to type this, I'm just doing an example. I just created this variable called something, and what does something belong to? Bruno, don't answer this, I know you know. Natalia or Daisy, what does something belong to? Does it belong to start? Does it belong to update? Does it belong to hello world? Does it belong to something else maybe? Yeah, Daisy says to hello world. And if I was to copy paste this over into start, oh my goodness. Oh, silly. If I was to put this into start, now it belongs to the start function, and the update function does not have access to it at all. So if I was to have this inside of hello world, both start and update have access to it, but if I was to, because start is contained within hello world, and update is contained within hello world, and something is contained within hello world, and so they all have access to each other. But if I was to put something into start, then everything else does not have access to something because they're on different layers of scope. You notice that there's indentation. Their update is on 1 level of indentation, something is on 2 levels of indentation, and something is not inside of update, so update does not have access to something. Kind of a mini lesson on how scope works. Okay. So, does anyone have any questions on that? I know coding is really arcane and it's very confusing and it is going to make you bash your head across the wall. That's fine. It's natural. But eventually it'll click and you'll be a coding god, believe me. What happens if I put something before hello world? That's a great question. So that would mean that hello world does not have access to that necessarily. So I actually can't type that out here if I was to put in public int. Oops. Yeah, it's Visual Studio is not even letting me type something. That is going to give me a compilation error saying that a namespace cannot directly contain members such as fields, methods, or statements. This thing cannot exist here, but if I was to put something like a new class in this file, I'm just doing this as a complete random example, like a public class something. This is an advanced thing that you don't have to do, but then Hello World does have access to it, and I guess technically in this case, update and start kind of have access to it, but just, I don't know, advanced stuff. Don't worry about it. Good question though. Does that kind of answer it? Pretty much you can't put anything outside of Hello World except for using statements. Put everything inside and that's how it works. Okay. So our goal with Hello World, this is a classic program that time and time again us programmers learn from, as it is a very, very simple one where all we are trying to do is send a message to Unity that says, hello world, and we're all chipper like that. And so in order to do this, we have to tell it to display a message when we start the game. Should we put this in start or update? Start or update?
Start?
Start, yeah. You two just jinxed each other. All right, so we do put this in start. I'm just going to put double slash. So we want to say something here. You don't have to type in these slashes. I'm just doing it as an example. So I want to put in a function here that tells Unity to print something to the console. Whenever we print something, that essentially just means display it to the console. I don't know why they call it print. They're trying to confuse us. So in order to do that, the function is just called print. So if we type in print, it has to be very exact. You can't even have capital letters. It has to be very exactly print. And then anytime we have a function, parentheses always follow that. So type in open parentheses, close parentheses. And then here's a bit of a tricky part. This is something that you're going to forget a lot, and it's okay. There's this weird little character right next to the enter key, well, a little bit close to the enter key, 2 over, it's called a semicolon. If you click on that, then that is going to end the statement for print. And then this is your function. But if you save this and go back into Unity, it'll actually give you a compilation error. It won't be able to compile the script. And it will give you the error there is no argument given that corresponds to the required formal parameter message of monobehavior.print object. Whew, mouthful. It's speaking in some arcane language that humans cannot understand, but don't worry, programmers can, and you're about to be programmers. So it says there is no argument given. We're telling it to say something, but it doesn't know what to say. It's like giving someone a mouth, but not teaching them how to speak. So we want to pass in an argument that says what we're printing to the screen. We can do that by hitting double quotation marks. And with that, we can type in our message here. This is a double quotation marks. This is how we say something. It's called a string object if you're curious. So we can type in whatever we want here. So I'm going to type in hello world. I'm going to save that. I can type in whatever I want. I could say hello world, hello Flappy Bird, hello, I don't know, Talia. Am I spelling that right? Perfect. So I click File, Save, or Control S, and the script will start to work for us. Okay. So now that we've saved that, we go back into Unity. It'll take a moment to detect our changes. Excuse me, Unity, I said I want to check my changes. There we go. And it will reload the scripts. And does anyone have any console errors?
Wait, did you have to do something to get it to detect your changes, or just did it automatically?
It does it automatically. If you, whenever you save your script, be sure to file save, or else it won't do that.
Yeah.
Um, it will
Oh,
pop up with a small message that says reloading script assemblies.
okay.
Um, Sometimes it can be a little bit finicky. Like in my case, didn't say that. I don't know if it just did it so fast I couldn't see, but I just removed something, hit Control Save, and then added something to hit Control Save, and then that detected the changes. Oh yeah, it looks like it just did it so fast I didn't even see it.
Okay, it's
Okay,
working now.
but if we click play, something horrible happens. Absolutely horrible. It plays the game, and it looks like our Hello World did not go to the console. Anyone have any idea why? Horribly concerning event. The most deadly error is the one that doesn't have a message.
Well, wouldn't it be that it's like, actually, I don't know.
That's
Do you
okay.
have to
It just says start is like before the first frame
Mhm.
update, and then update, you have to like make it, you have to tell it to
Not,
do something.
not quite. It's simpler than that.
import the script to use it or something?
You're close. You're close. I'd count that as kind of correct. So, in order to make it so that this script actually works, the problem is that we aren't telling the script to work. Computers are very specific. So if we click on um, any of our objects, I'm going to click on the player, for example, we just haven't added the component yet. We created a new component, but we didn't tell it where to exist. So if I click on the player, click add component, I can actually just type in hello world in here and it will detect that. You notice that there's two scripts, hello world and completed hello world. And that's just because the completed hello world is the one I gave you just in case I didn't make it to coding somehow, but it also has comments in it. So if you double click on that, you'll actually see some useful explanation in case you're curious about how coding works. Okay, so add the regular hello world to this. And now if I click play, inside the console, a tiny message will appear that says, hello Natalia, or hello world, or whatever you typed in there. Is that working for everyone? Bruno's a yes? Perfect. Bam, bam, bam.
Yep.
Sweet. Yeah. So we can actually add this to anything. If I was to add this to Square as well, we would get two hello Natalias. And also, I'm not going to do this just because we're a little bit low on time, but if I was to print this, if I was to copy this and put it into update, you'll notice that it happens every single frame. I think it's kind of fun whenever you do stuff every frame. Boom, I already have 1,000 print messages. Fun times. So we have Hello World, and we Hello World is not going to make this game for us. It's a great way to learn programming, but it's not going to make Flappy Bird flap. What we actually want is Flappy Bird to flap, Dylan. So in order to make that, I'm actually going to show you a shortcut to create a script. Really fun thing that I loved the second I discovered it. If you click on player, and there's this add component button, if you just type in the name of the script that you want to make here, it'll actually make it for you. So if I type in jumper, capital J, you'll see that there's a completed jumper, but I want to click on new script specifically, then click create and add. It's going to recompile a little bit because it has a new script. And in my case, it even opened it up automatically. Sometimes you have to go into Unity and specifically double click on the script. Wait a second, it didn't open it up automatically, just open it up to Hello World. Come on, Unity, I believed in you. Okay, yeah, it's compiling. One of the things that I don't like about Unity, every time I make a script, I have to wait a while before I can open it up. Okay, but if I double click on it, then it will open up to Jumper, and we'll be able to type in the stuff that we actually want. So this one is going to be a bit more complicated than Little Hello World. And what we want to do is make it so that every time we either click space or we left click, we will then add some velocity to our player so that they go up instead of down for a little bit. Should that go in start Or should it go in update? Or somewhere else maybe? Penny, for your thoughts? Start or update?
Updates.
Okay. Daisy says before start, and there are cases where that could be true. I think Bruno is a little bit more correct for what we're going with, anyways, in update. So I think maybe what Daisy was getting at was that there are actually some secret functions. There's things like on collision enter 2D. Like this is a new function, but we're not going to be messing with that. Instead, we're going to just put this in update. And what we want to do is update is called every single frame. And so we want to check every single frame. If we tapped space or if we left clicked, then we want to add some velocity. So in order to get this working, I can actually just get rid of start. I don't need this at all. So I'm going to get rid of that so we can focus a little bit more on update. And there are some things that I want to do in this script. And whenever we click or press space, we want to go up. We want to set our velocity. Well, the thing that's actually making physics happen is our rigid body component. So if I click on, oh no, I accidentally saved and now it's recompiling. If we actually go back into Unity and click on the player, there's this rigid body 2D component. And this is the thing that actually has velocity. There's actually this info tab right here. If you click on that, it actually has this slot that says velocity and it tells us what its current velocity is. What we want to do is set that to x equals 0, y equals some positive number. This is called a vector 2. I'm going to be talking about that a little bit more in a second. So in order to make this happen, what we want to do is get our rigid body 2D component and use that in our script. And the easiest way to get that is the same way this sprite renderer is getting the sprite. You just leave an option open up for the game developer so that they can slot in the image, or in our case, the rigid body component. So in order to do that, we want to add in a property to this jumper game object, or jumper component. So I want to put this above update because this belongs to jumper specifically, not update. So I want to put this right above update, and follow along with me for a second. Type in public, all capital letters, or lowercase letters rather, space, and now we want to type in the type of property that we want. So that's rigid body 2D, 2D specifically. And then after that, we need to name this property. We can call it whatever we want. We can call it Jimmy or Daisy or something. I'm going to call it body. You can call it rigid body, any name you want. And if we go to File, Save, and we go back into Unity, we'll notice some magic happen. After it compiles, we click on Player, all the way to the bottom where it says Jumper. It has this new property right here. It's called Body. That's the same name we gave it. And for some reason, it's giving it a capital letter. Unity just likes to make it look pretty, but it also has this slot for the rigid body itself. So we can actually, there's two ways to drag in this rigid body, three ways I guess. We can either just hold down left click on the rigid body name and drag that straight into this rectangle, or we can click on this circle, this tiny little circle. This is the same thing that we did for the sprite, and that will open up all of the rigid bodies in our scene. We need to double click on the player rigid body. Another thing that you could do if you really wanted to is drag and drop the player from the hierarchy into that slot. It will intelligently grab the rigid body out of that. So just make sure that your rigid body is assigned. If you go back into the code, you'll notice that it didn't change anything there. It didn't say like body equals the player's rigid body or something like that. This is just a reference to the rigid body inside the inspector, because we can reuse this script multiple times, remember? So now that we have this body component, what we want to do is change its velocity. Does anyone have any questions? Did the body appear inside the inspector? The thing that made it appear, by the way, is specifically this public keyword. This is called an access modifier, and there's other keywords you can put in here. There's things like private, package private, internal. There's a whole bunch of them, but public just makes it so that you can have access to it inside the inspector, which is very useful. The only other one you'll ever use is called private, which hides it from the inspector. All the other ones are just really advanced usage that even I don't really use. Okay. So now we want to make it so that the body velocity goes up. So if I type in body, this is the same name that I gave the rigid body. If I type in a period after that, this allows us to access everything inside the body component. So if you have Unity autocomplete on, it'll give you all of the options for the properties or functions inside of this body component, but I already know what I want. I want to say velocity, and that is the name of the property which controls how fast this is going. And then after that, I'm going to put in a space. Space is not important, I guess, but it looks pretty. So we want to set the velocity. We want to assign something to it. If we click on an equals mark, punctuation, I don't know, equals key, then that will allow us to assign something to this velocity. In my case, I want to assign a velocity that says, a vector 2 specifically, that just points straight up. Does anyone remember from high school math what a vector is? Ages ago, I know. Bruno is shaking his head. Do you know? High school math is a little bit different from Unity math, but they're still pretty related. Essentially, what a vector 2 is, well, if you remember from math class, there's two parts of a vector. There's two numbers. There's the magnitude, and then it's how strong the vector is, how far it goes. And then there's also the angle of it that says what direction it's going. Unity does it a little bit differently. It still has two numbers, but they have different purposes. It has x and y. So it has, if we set x equals to 1 and y equals 0, that is a vector 2 pointing to the right. Maybe that way. I don't know which way my camera is pointing. And if we type in 0, 1, so x equals 0, y equals 1, that means up, straight up there. So that's exactly what we want to do. We want to create a new vector 2 that has the direction up and also the x value of 0, because we don't want it to move left and right. We only want it to go up whenever we click. So I can do this by typing in new vector 2. That's a capital V, lowercase new, and open parentheses, close parentheses. And just for simplicity's sake, put a semicolon after that. Seriously, if you forget these semicolons, I don't blame you at all. They're so easy to forget about. Unity is going to tell you exactly where you forgot about them. I was part of a, if you've ever done Khan Academy, their coding lessons, they actually have, so they force semicolons, and their mascot for coding is literally this little green blob thing that has a semicolon and is on his forehead. It's that common of an error. It's okay to miss it. And then inside of this, I want to tell the direction that this velocity is going in. So we do not want it to go left to right. So I'm going to set the x to 0. The first value is x, the second value is y. And then I can separate the values by typing in a comma. And then the y value, I want to make some positive number, something that's going up. I'm going to make it just 5, for instance. If I hover over vector 2, if you have the Unity integration, it'll tell you exactly what is expected here. There's float x, float y. Float is like a floating point decimal. It means that it could be 0.5 or 5 or just anything that has a decimal. So if I save that, do Control S, and I go back to Unity, it's reloading, bam. Okay. Now if I click play, it finally works exactly as we want it to. Whoa, it didn't work exactly as we wanted it to. It's going straight up. I'm sure you can guess what the issue was. We didn't tell it. We didn't tell it to only go up in certain situations. We just told it to always go up every single frame. Set your velocity to +5 in the y direction. And we can actually, if we look in the info section in the inspector, it actually says velocity equals x equals 0, y equals 5. Fun stuff. So that's not what we want. What we want to do is do this conditionally, only when we want it to, only in this certain condition. So we can actually type out this condition very easily ourselves. It's something called an if statement. Does everyone have a Flappy Bird going up? Does anyone not have a Flappy Bird going up? If your Flappy Bird is not floating, you have a problem. But it's kind of funny. If it doesn't work, it works. But if it's working, then it's not working. Go away, autocomplete. Go away, I said. My newest version of Visual Studio has this autocomplete function that is great whenever you're personally coding, horrible whenever you're giving demonstrations. So what we want to do is make it so that this conditionally arises. Every frame, if we click a button or press space, then set body.velocity to this. That's actually exactly it. The keyword is if. So I'm actually going to ask you guys, for simplicity's sake, do we want to make it so that it floats whenever we left click or press space? Which makes more sense to you?
Smash the spacebar, obviously.
Yeah, spacebar is usually more intuitive to me as well.
I mean, that's just my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Agree.
so
Yeah.
what's that?
No, I say agreed. Space is much better. Yep.
Yes. What did I make it? Up arrow key. Sounds great. We're making an RPG Maker game, right? So if you type in the keyword if, that's lowercase if, and then you type in parentheses after that, and then after that you type in a open curly brace, close curly brace, press enter, and it will look something like this. This is a new if statement where if something inside the parentheses, whenever this something inside the parentheses evaluates to true, then this code inside of the curly braces runs. So I can actually move this body.velocity into the if statement. And now if some property is true, then you run this code that says body.velocity equals up. So now what I want to do is make this code actually work conditionally, because right now there's nothing in there, so it's actually going to give me a compilation error. So we want to do space. So we want to get access to a Unity function called getKeyDown. So this function, the way it works is it returns true if this exact frame we started pressing space, and it returns false every other frame. This is very common in Unity code. We'll get used to this a lot if you make more games, which I highly recommend you do. It's super fun. So type in input, that's a capital I, because we are accessing a class, a whole collection of functions. Type in a period after that so that we can access these functions. And then we want to type in, it's get key down. It's a capital G, capital K, capital D. This is a function, so we always want to end that with a open parentheses, close parentheses. That's a curly parentheses. I don't know. Inside there, this is we want to pass in what key we're asking about. So I could ask it about key A, or maybe shift, or escape, something like that. But I want to specifically say space. So I think, yeah. So in order to do that, I type in key code, it's capital K, capital C, dot space, capital S. This is something that's a little bit advanced. It's called an enum, an enumeration. Essentially, I'm just telling Unity that I want the space key, and instead of Unity just having me type in space, they're having me clarify that this is a keyword. This is a key code, space. Okay, so now if I hit File, Save. By the way, Control S on Unity as well. It's helpful. It'll save your life. have a story to tell. I'll tell that later if I have time. So if I save this script and I go back into Unity and I click play, if I don't do anything, Flappy Bird should fall. If Flappy Bird is still going up, then that means you haven't put the body.velocity inside the if statement, so do that real quick. But if I restart, just so that Flappy Bird is in a more manageable position, if I press space, it'll move up every time I press space. Now I actually have a Flappy Bird, and this actually kind of feels like Flappy Bird. That's great. Does everyone have this? Does anyone not have it?
I think I saved my file in the wrong place.
Oops. I ask you to.
It says that it's like in the console, it says assets, jumper, CS, expected. I think it's just in the wrong folder.
See, it's expected.
I'll figure that out.
No. So I think. What does the error say exactly?
I can screenshot it
Sure, that works.
and put it in the chat.
Anytime you're ever asking someone about a Unity error, it's very helpful to screenshot the console. So you're already ahead of yourself. Nice job. Sorry, ahead of yourself is a mean way to say it. You're in a good spot. You're
Right.
getting a good footing.
I can't paste this into the chat. It's not letting me.
It's okay.
Really?
If you're using Lightshot, you can copy paste that as a URL. But what we can do is just share your screen and we can debug it real quick.
Sure.
So to share your screen, that's at the bottom left.
Okay.
It looks a bit like a monitor.
Screen share.
You might have to set up some permissions real quick. You're not on Mac, so it's easier. I think you just click yes if you're on Google Chrome.
Okay. The Unity window, right?
Yeah.
This one. Can you see it?
Yep. Okay. So.
Is that right? Yeah. So it's down here.
No, you saved it in the right place. Okay. So one of the cool things that you can do with a console, double click on that. Double click on the error. Oh, actually, can you change your screen share so that I can see your entire screen because I can't see Visual Studio?
How do I do that?
It should just be, if you stop sharing and start sharing again, there should be an option for screen 1 or screen 2 if you're on a
Oh, I see entire screen
there
here. Share.
Perfect.
There you go.
Okay.
You can see all my desktop nonsense.
That's okay. My desktop is way dirtier than that. I have to do cleaning every once in a while. So if you double click on that error, it will open up in Visual Studio. Are you on a 4K monitor?
I don't know, maybe.
I don't know. I'm jealous. So it actually opens up to, so if you could maximize Visual Studio or zoom in a little, yeah, okay.
So you can see it says it's restricted mode. I think this might be like related to my work setup.
Oh, you're actually in Visual Studio Code, not Visual Studio. They're actually two very different things. Visual Studio Code is like the lightweight version. I actually use Visual Studio Code more often, but for our purposes, it still works fine. That's why the Unity integration is not working though. Okay. So.
Oh, look, this is red. Is that bad?
Yes, that is bad. So essentially, what this error is saying is that you are missing a not a semicolon, a closed parenthesis somewhere. Closed curly brace, rather. So you have a number of open braces and you have a number of closed braces, and the number is not the same.
Right, so, the missing one. Where do I put it?
Just going to have you look at it for a little bit. You're going to be doing a lot of head bashing in the future, so I'd like you to get a little bit of practice in now.
Nope. Okay. Why? Oh, I see. Nope. It's automatically like making it open and close for me. Okay, so it's opening here, and this one's closing.
Yeah, and the second one, that next close brace is closing the update function, but you want to close the if statement. So if you type a close curly brace right after the body, then that should be how it works.
Like right here?
Yeah. So close curly brace.
All right, there we go. All right. Thank you.
Let's save that and let's go to Unity just to make sure that works.
Uh,
I mentioned earlier that computers are very specific and they yell at you if you aren't specific enough. Bruno is smiling. He knows exactly what I mean. Oh my god, compilation errors are so silly. Come on, can we
oh,
just...
it's working now. Oh no,
Okay.
but not okay.
In order to play the game, you might have to click inside of the game window. So just click play and then just start mashing space. Bam, 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 bam. Like you're playing Cookie Clicker or something.
Right now I
Yeah,
see there. Yeah, I'm flying. I'm flying. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen.
beautiful. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Also, I just want to give you a standing ovation because that's the first Flappy Bird that I have seen out of you three. So awesome. It's looking great. Keep it up.
Sweet.
So that was actually the last bit of coding practice that we had, and I just want to say, all of you, congrats. Just give yourself a pat on the back. Guess what? You're programmers now. Hey, you are programmers now. You made Hello World, and you also made Flappy Bird flap. That is impressive. Seriously, like, it's seriously impressive. I just want to stress that. People go to college for years to do what you did. You did it in less than an hour. It's crazy. Seriously crazy. Okay, so as always, I have run a little bit over time on my scripts because I get too enthusiastic about scripts because I love coding. So I'm running a little bit low on time. Let's see. Let me just check my notes. Okay. So right now we have it so that Flappy Bird flaps, and this game is really fun and all, but there's nothing really that makes the player lose. So we can play this game as much as we want, but there's no excitement behind it. And so what we want to do in order to fix that is do exactly what the actual Flappy Bird game does and make it so that these pipes move and kill us. So what we want to do is make it so that this pipe moves to the left, and I also want to put a pipe up here that moves to the left, and I just want to put a whole bunch of pipes down everywhere. So I actually want to make a few changes to the way we're doing this first, just to make this right. Right now we have this square. I'm going to rename this to pipe real quick. It makes more sense to me. And what I want to do is something called a parent-child relationship. What this means is I want to have one game object that is the parent of other game objects. It's kind of like how the scene is the parent for all of these other game objects. The camera is a child of the scene. I want to create a pipe controller that controls a set of pipes, so one on the bottom, one on the top, and then whenever that pipe controller moves, both of its pipes will move with it. So if it moves up and down or to the left and right, the two pipes will move with it. We can set this up pretty easily by clicking this plus in the hierarchy, clicking create empty. And then we can call this whatever we want. I'm going to call this pipe controller. Bam. Can you hear me, my keyboard when I'm typing, by the way? I try to get the loudest keyboard ever. I hope you appreciate that. So now that we have this pipe controller, we want to... Oh, thank you, Daisy. I'm flattered. I want to make it so that this pipe is a child of pipe controller, and I can do this just by dragging pipe inside of the hierarchy on top of pipe controller inside of the hierarchy as well. So the end goal is to make it so that pipe controller and pipe, they are both like this, how there's a little arrow right next to pipe controller. Make it something like that. And then what I want to do is make it so that there's an opposite pipe that is above. So if I right click on pipe, I can click duplicate, and that will create a second pipe that is exactly on top of it. And I am just going to click on the move tool. That way I can move it on the y-axis and exclusively, and take this and just move it straight up. Okay, about there should be fine. And now I want to make it so that this pipe actually looks like it's up. So I'm going to click on, there's this flip mode right here on the sprite renderer for the pipe. If I click on Y, it'll flip it on the y-axis, and that looks a little bit more like how we expect it. All right. So to demonstrate what this parent-child relationship does, whenever we move this pipe controller, so if I have this selected and if I have to select the move tool specifically, because the pipe controller doesn't have a image associated with it, I don't have a rectangle that I can move around. And so I have to select the move tool if I want to move this. If I start moving this, it'll move both of its pipes. Does everyone have that relationship set up? A little bit weird, a little bit hard to get. It's okay if you don't have it set up. It's weird. Okay. And another way to, well, just to clarify, these pipes, they are offset from the pipe controller position. And so we have kind of a weird thing. In my case, this pipe controller is a little bit to the left of the pipes. And so I can change that by clicking on one of the pipes, and there's this position value inside the transform component. And this x is equal to positive 4.15. That is the offset from the parent. If I just change that to 0, now it is immediately on top in terms of the x value of the pipe controller. I'm going to do the same thing to the duplicate as well. That way both the pipe controllers are lined up with the parent. Just makes it look nice. Okay. And now, before we had it so that you scripted this component yourself, it's a little bit of a complicated script though. Not too complicated. I think you have all the tools that you need to understand it. But if you click on add controller, type in pipe controller, just add that. And what this will do is it adds in a few values to this pipe controller. It will make it so that it moves to the left at a certain speed, and it will also make it so that it is randomly up or down. It makes it so that there's a bit of variance. And it also makes it so that whenever the pipe controller moves too far to the left, it will jump over to the right. So if I was to click play on this as an example, we'll notice that the pipe controller moves up and down a little bit, like it initially spawns up and down, then it moves all the way to the left of the screen, and then it seems to disappear, but it comes back because it's wrapping around constantly. And so this is how we build our level. What we want to do is just duplicate this a ton of times. So if I stop playing, reminding myself to Control S, sweating from that. So in order to duplicate these, same thing as we did with the pipes, just right click that, duplicate, you move them over. Easy way to duplicate things. I have to leave in 1 minute. Oh, darn. Talia. Well, there'll at least be the recording. We will send out the recording to all of you, so you'll be able to learn from that. At the very least, you got the coding segment, which is the most important part. I'm sorry that you have to go, though. All right. So,
yeah, so much. I do have to go. I have to pay attention to my children. So
that's important, so I can't blame you.
But I'll watch the video. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Good luck with your Flappy Birds.
Yes. My Flappy Birds will need all the luck in order to survive these pipes. Okay, see you.
Bye.
Okay, so in order to, an easier way to duplicate these is just to hit Control D on the keyboard and move it over. You can actually hold down this axis and hit Control D and it will duplicate it in place. I found out about the hotkey where you can duplicate while you're moving it, and I was just, oh my goodness, it's great. It saved me so much time. I'm just gonna line a bunch of them up. Hit play, see if that feels good. Let's play through it a little bit. Space. There's a bit of a bug where Flappy Bird does not die when he touches the pipes, and while it may be desirable, it is not desirable by my standards, and so I'm going to change that in a bit. Also notice that they kind of overlap here. That means we made a few too many pipes. I'm just gonna delete these last two. So if I click on the pipe controller, you can delete them. See if that works. Oops. Oh, Flappy Bird doesn't need to live to see this. Okay. Oh, it's still not quite. I want to delete one more set of pipes. Let's see if that's good. Another way to do this would be to create a prefab and spawn these over time. That's probably the better approach, but honestly, it's a little bit more complicated. Oh, I see, I missed it a little bit more. You can mess around with this on your own as well. Probably what I might do is change the X restart of all of these, um, just so it can, I believe the X bound, whenever it reaches -20, that's when it teleports, and it teleports to the X restart, and then it's moving at the speed of speed. It's moving at the speed of speed. Great. And the Y variation is how much it will randomly move up or down whenever it starts or teleports. So we're just gonna move those down a little bit. Okay. Do pipes work for both of you? Okay. Awesome. So we only have one more thing to do. It's amazing. I'm actually on time this time. I'm always late. Whew. And that's just UI. What we want to do is add in a little bit of score. So this, as we pass by more pipes, our score will periodically increase. And to do that, we need to add in a little bit of UI. UI is weirdly complicated in Unity. They do it in a bit of a weird way, but it technically works, so I guess that's okay. So in order to create a bit of text on the screen that says our score, what we want to do is click on this plus button in the hierarchy, go to UI, that's right, UI, you guessed it. And then what we want to do then is click the text mesh pro object. This weird window will come up. What TMP is, text mesh pro, Unity used to have, it still has, this old text component that wasn't super great. It was a little bit limited, and it did the job, but there was a lot of things it didn't do. And so some other people created Text Mesh Pro as an upgrade to that, and Unity decided they liked it so much, the fans decided they liked it so much that Unity just added it to the base editor, which is amazing. That also means for some reason whenever you import the first text object, you have to click this Import TMP Essentials button. I don't know why they do that. You literally use text in every game, so I don't know, you do you, Unity. And don't click the second one. The first button just makes it so that you can use text. The second one will import some examples. It's kind of fun to look through, but you don't have to do that.
Okay.
Now that you have the text, you'll notice that it is right here in the UI, but I don't see it in the scene. And that's because the way Unity decided to do UI is that UI is separate from the scene, as it should be. You don't want the UI to move whenever you move in the game, but they also made it so that it's upscaled a bunch. So in order to access the UI, double click on the canvas object that was created whenever we created the text, and that will zoom out. You can do this to all objects, by the way. Double click to zoom in on them. It's really nice. If you double click on the canvas, it'll zoom out, and this is our canvas. I'm going to select the rect tool just so I can edit this a little bit more easily. So this is like a overlay. It's a really big version of the canvas, and they crop it and overlay it onto the screen. Bit of a weird way to do it, Unity, but it works. So if you click on the text object, either in the hierarchy or the scene, you'll be able to move this around, and we can move it wherever we want. So I'm going to put it in, I don't know, the bottom corner sounds fine, the bottom center of the screen. And I can also make it so that it is anchored to the bottom. You'll notice that there's these four weird triangles that appear whenever we have the text component selected. And if we just drag that to the bottom of the screen, that is the anchor point for the text. So before, if I just left this, come on, work with me. If I just left this inside the center of the screen, and I was to place this on a different aspect ratio, notice that the text does not stay at the bottom of the screen. It's not what we want. What we want it to do is stay at the bottom. And so in order to do that, we just set the anchor to the bottom of the screen just like that. And we can drag it just with our cursor, just like that. And now if I preview this by popping it out and changing the aspect ratio, while you're moving it, it will not adjust, but whenever you stop moving it, it will calculate everything again and it will work just fine. Beautiful. Both of you got
That's pretty
text?
cool. Yeah.
Sweet. Text is really weird. UI is really weird. It's an entire job on its own. So if you learn it pretty well, make good money off of it. I'm going to change this text to say something like, I don't know, score 0. This is just the default text. It'll hide itself automatically when we start the game and add our component to it. And I can also add in a whole bunch of other options. I'm going to make this horizontally centered, or horizontally centered. Make it bold as well. Do whatever you want. You can even change the color. And last thing that I'm going to do is add in a new component. And I completely forget what this is called. Seriously. So if we actually don't know the name of a component that we have scripted ourselves, we can go into the scripts folder. We can just drag and drop it from here. So we have the scorekeeper script, that's what it's called. And drag that onto the add component button, and it will add in the component right there very nicely. Okay. And then we have 2 fields right here that we have to fill out. If we just play the game, it'll give us some weird errors. Actually doesn't do anything at all. So we have to fill out these variables in order to make this work. So if I click on the circle next to the text, and oh, nothing's showing up there. Oh my goodness. I know what's going on. That's kind of sucky. Yeah, so remember when I mentioned that Unity has a old text system? It looks like this script is actually using that old text system. Okay, easiest way to deal with this is just to change the script. So if you find the script in Unity and you double click on Scorekeeper,
Okay.
you can open this up and type in TMP before this text right here, put an underscore there. I'm just doing this just to quickly fix this error, but you'll notice that in my case it actually has some squiggly lines because this is an external library. I have to add in a new one. So I'm going to type in this line up here using TMP row, TM Pro, Text Mesh Pro, at the very top. I'm going to put this into chat as well just so you can get it specifically. And if we save this, then it will work just fine. The one thing I didn't double check. Well, now you know how to go and edit external scripts, which is pretty cool. So now, if you click on the text object in the hierarchy, we can start changing out these settings. So this score text, we can click on the circle now and double click on the text object. We can also drag the component straight there, or we could drag in the text game object from the hierarchy into that slot as well. Either way works. For the player, I'm going to click the circle there and find the player in this list, or I could even type it out. There, double click there. Or again, I could drag in the player from the hierarchy into this slot. So now if I click play, I'd really encourage you to go back into this script as well, just to see exactly what it's doing. If I actually try to play the game, you notice that my score periodically increases. This is great. Last thing I want to add is some excitement to the game to make it so that the Flappy Bird unfortunately perishes whenever he touches a pipe. Tragically, even. So I should have done this earlier, but what we want to do is make it so that all of these colliders have a component which, whenever it touches another collider, it will destroy the thing that touched it, delete it from the scene. And so the I really should have done this earlier. Now I'm silly. So the easiest way to do that is to expand all of these. And if you click on one of the pipes, you can go here, add component called destroyer. No, it's not called destroyer. It is called destroyer. I just mistyped it. Okay. Another issue here is that I changed out some of these scripts because I wanted to do less scripting this class, but it looks like I actually uh, forgot to change the name of this one. So this is a good example of, you don't have to edit this script actually. In this case, I named this initially completed destroyer because this was initially a thing that we would do in class, but I ended up changing the name to just destroyer, and it's not letting me add in the component because Unity doesn't detect that there's a component there in the first place. And so whenever we change the name of something, we also have to change it inside the file. But in my case, I think the easiest way to fix this is just to right-click on destroyer inside of Unity, then click rename, and type in completed before this,
Mhm.
and then it will save, and now we can actually add it to the pipes. This is what I call embarrassing. Click on add component. Now that should be done, and type in destroyer, and we'll see that the completed destroyer script is there, and we can add it there. I added it to this pipe here just to make sure that this is working. I can start to play the game, and if I touch that pipe, Flappy Bird dies. If I don't, if I touch any other pipe, then Flappy Bird is going to stick around for a little bit longer until that other pipe wraps around and eventually I touch it. But we want to add it to all of the pipes, and I think the easiest way to do it from here is just to select this pipe and then hold down Control, Command if you're on a Mac, and just select every pipe. That way you can multiple select them. And actually want to deselect the first pipe because we already added it there. So select all of the pipes except for the first one, and add, while you have it, all of them selected, you can actually add the component to all of them all in one go. So I just add it there, and now it's done. Sweet. So if I click play, bam, 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 pop. Sweet. We have Flappy Bird. Bam, bam. And somehow I'm exactly on time, literally by the second. That's impressive. You go me. So, seriously, that's the first time. So there's a few ways. I just want to shout out, this project is far from complete. There are some ways that you can change this so that you can expand your knowledge of Unity and just practice making games. The first thing that I would try is just change out these sprites. You don't want to make Flappy Bird, you want to make Flappy, I don't know, D&D wizard or something. And he's avoiding big orcs or pointy swords. And he's casted the fly spell on himself or something like that. Change out the sprites, that changes the game entirely. I'd also recommend that there's a bug in here right now where whenever Flappy Bird goes to the bottom of a pipe, it didn't do it in this case since the pipes are so big, but if Flappy Bird just goes down, he manages to dodge the pipes and he's still alive. He's just falling infinitely. Figure out a way to fix that bug. We actually have a document in here called the handout. If you don't have Microsoft Word, you can put this into Google Docs and it will read it for you. This will give you a few practices that you can use to expand this game. And actually, I think you can just open up the Google Drive folder and double click there. And that is Flappy Bird in a nutshell. Another thing you can do is add in some music by just dragging it there and clicking loop. So just drag in the micro boogie sound, put it there. And now if you click play, you have some wonderful music playing. I did not find this music, I will clarify. So If you don't like it, don't blame me. Just want to throw it out there.
Awesome.
It's actually not playing right now. I don't know why. I don't know. That's another thing for you to do with your homework. And so that's Flappy Bird in a nutshell. There's also some other things that I do want to show you. For one, this is the Discord invite. Naturally, we have a nice, solid, growing community in IGA. We're actually hosting a game jam tomorrow. So if you really want to get better at games, I'd super recommend you join that. The best way to get better at games is to make games. Um, it's the best thing that you could do for yourself. Join our Discord. Seriously, highly recommend it.
Can we join as like just as observer just to
Oh
see
yeah.
how things work? Okay, awesome.
Yeah, yeah. It'll ask you when you join, are you here for the jam or are you here for other stuff?
All right.
The jam isn't something that we do often. It's just something that we did this year. And we have just a weekly Wednesday podcast where we have industry professionals come in and we ask them a bunch of questions, and you can ask your questions live. Really fun. Honestly, we have had some really wonderful people come in lately. Um, One thing that I am going to, if you have to go, that's completely okay, by the way. I am going to plug in some stuff from IGA, some of the other things that we do. If you're not a fan of that, it's okay. Um, just kind of my job to do this. And uh, so I really want to stress this level 1 program. It is in 3 weeks, I think. I believe Daisy went through this, but it's this wonderful program. We have a 3-level program. It's because we're gamified and all that. Oh, I didn't clarify this at the beginning. I'm awful. IGA stands for Indie Game Academy. It is a gamified, multidisciplinary boot camp program where we teach people how to become game developers. So if you are a programmer or if you're an artist, no matter what you do, we try to help you make games and get into the industry. So this level 1 program is our first way of doing this. It's a weekend boot camp where you build a game in a single weekend, and it's I guess it's kind of like the game jam coming up, just more focused on actual um, instructing. So we'll be making a tower defense game that weekend, which is really cool. We actually just created this class, and it
Awesome.
goes over a whole bunch of stuff. Like we go over game design, visual design. We have a few professors coming in. I don't know how many, and I don't know who they are yet, but we have a lot of different people coming in talking about a lot of different um, game design stuff, how to break into the industry, how to network, all that kind of stuff. And I will be teaching the tower defense part, but that's only going to be for a small bit of it, honestly. It's an 8-hour program, and Unity is like 3 hours of it. So we're going to be focusing mostly on other stuff. And this is our schedule down here. We're going over um, intro to game design, game production, and a whole bunch of other wonderful things.
That's awesome.
We also do, after the level 1 program, we also have a level 3 program, which is, it's definitely an upgrade. Uh, our level 2 program is a 1-month bootcamp where you work by yourself to discover your vertical. So if you're a programmer, you focus on programming. If you're an artist, you focus on art. And unfortunately, we won't be doing that for a bit. We actually are pretty close to our level 3 program. But our level 3 program is um, frankly amazing. It's a 3-month boot camp where you don't make a game by yourself. You make a game with an actual studio of 4 other people. You form a studio by yourselves, and IGA is pretty much just more or less holding your hand to walk you through the way, creating a safe environment for you to, um, frankly, fail fast and fail forward. It's okay to make mistakes there, and we're here to teach you how to avoid these mistakes. And we go over a whole bunch of stuff. You can read all about it on our website. Bit of a bug here. Can you fix that yet? It says January 10th, but it's actually late February. Ooh, one thing I forgot to mention. Something pretty cool about this level 1 bootcamp It's $50, but you guys can use this magical code I'm posting in chat, IDA50, to get that all for $50. And not $50, 50%. Um, so
Awesome.
that brings it down to $25, which is awesome. And for the level 3 program, it is a bit heftier on the price, to be perfectly transparent. It does, we do offer a lot of scholarships. So if you go into the application, I think you can get it about half off. We have a whole bunch of people from different studios coming in to teach classes. Last cohort, we had, I don't remember everyone, but I do remember two specific people. There was a art director professor from Mojang who worked on Minecraft Dungeons,
Nice.
and there was also a guy from Wizards of the Coast who made Magic the Gathering. He was a game design professor. And this year, it's looking like it's also pretty stacked up on professors. And it works in a 3-month process where for the first entire month, you're focused on forming your studio and deciding what game you want to make. And then you have an alpha program where you work on building your alpha over, I think, 2 weeks, no, 4 weeks. And then you have your beta program where you actually start fleshing it out, and then you have your release. And at the end of each step, you actually get to play test this with other people. We actually invite a whole bunch of people to come in, and there's this big, really big place. It's actually right here in the castle. And at the very end of the program, the culmination of it all is when we bring in actual publishers, and you have to pitch your game to these publishers. You're divided into one of 4 wizardly houses, and you are either in part of House Ranger, House Rogue, House Warrior, House Cleric, and then you uh, compete for the House Cup. Yes, we went really hard on the Harry Potter theme. And we will there's a whole bunch of publishers at the end, and you guys actually are on a stage virtually, and you will pitch your game, and they will talk amongst themselves and choose which of those is the most likely to succeed. And it's just this really, really awesome experience. I would really recommend. Whew, let's see. How do we know if we are qualified to ask for a scholarship for level 3? So, if you have to ask, I would say you're qualified. We give out, um, let's see, I think we take in 20 students. Yeah, 4 houses, each of them have 5 people. We take in 20 students, and I believe we have 9 scholarships of like half off, and we have a few scholarships for other um, other amounts as well. If you feel like you need that scholarship, absolutely apply for the biggest one. If you feel like you could still attend without the scholarship, we ask that you don't, just because there's a lot of wonderful people out there who are less fortunate than us, and we like to give those scholarships to people that most need it. Um, but absolutely, if you feel like you need the scholarship, then of course ask for it. It's there so that people can attend this program and learn and grow. Um,
Dylan, can you drop the link for level one? I
yes.
was trying to find on the website, I couldn't find it.
Mhm. Yeah, I just dropped it in chat,
Awesome.
and I put the promo code there as well. Really recommend you use that. And I'm also just going to put our website in chat as well.
Awesome.
Of course, I'd recommend, like, completely honestly, I would recommend you take the level 1 program before even considering the level 3 program, because it's, pretty big investment of both time and money. We have professors that are, frankly, far better at things than I am, far less monotone for one. And uh, so, yeah, if you like the style of their teaching, then I would, at that point, consider level 3. If either of you have questions about level 1, level 3, or anything else even, feel free to ask. One thing that I will say is if you want to connect with our founder, Willem, who will be doing the bulk of teaching both of the programs, you can actually scroll down a bit. There's this schedule a free career consultation.
Nice.
You can click on that and you can schedule a 30-minute talk to talk about, either the level 3 program or just to chat like, how do I break into the industry? I chatted with him myself, and it was very enlightening. Do you have any
That's
questions? I'm going to sit down.
all good. Guys, I need to drop. Need to go. Thank you very much, Elon. I'm probably gonna see you in the level 1. You're
Okay,
gonna
awesome.
schedule here. And thank you, Daisy.
Mhm.
Buena noche.
Yeah, sorry that this went a little bit overtime. Again, I'm just awful at that. Uh, Nothing else to say there. All right, see you, Bruno.
Bye bye. See ya.
Ooh. All right, and see you too, Daisy. I'm gonna hop off and prepare for the game jam. See you all. Okay. This time I am going to remember to stop the recording. See you all.